your fault if you trust. But there's one thing I know, it's this: opposites do coexist, and the last thing they'll ever kill is love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we're not giving up. No, no, I could let you go, say it's not worth it. Oh, I could give up before we know. And what's the use in having hope? And even though everything's wrong and it shows, I still look at you and I know one thing could be perfect. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we're not giving up. No, no. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we're not giving up. No, no. I don't wanna be naive, but I catch myself wanting to believe, and I think I could take a risk this time. It's a hard time to look for hope when the truth can feel like a joke or worse. They tell you it's your fault if you try. World's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we're not giving up. No, no. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. Hey!
Is that we have to face the challenges, the struggles, the oppression of this world that we are called as Unitarian Universalists to face and transform. And we are going to need to center love and joy and community and beauty along the way. So we're going to talk about those things today. I want to say that when I watched that video, especially after last week here in Texas, I feel emotional. We were without power for 4 days. It was -1 degree. And it's hard to convey to people in the Midwest. I lived in Chicago for 9 years. It's hard to convey what it's like here without power. We don't have the insulation, the clothing, the anything for that. And it's a whole different world. I tell people, I've stood on the corner waiting for the bus in -17 degrees, but it's different when you know you're going to a warm apartment. It's different when you're getting on a warm bus. And we were cold for so long. And then when our power came back on, the water was not drinkable for days. And some people are still waiting. So I look at the people in that video and I think about what they've been through in the last week. And some of them have had COVID. Some of them have gone through divorce this year. There's been a lot of heartbreak among the people you saw having such a good time. And that's the truth of life, right? And so I see it and I know what we're fighting for, because we've also had joy along the way. Those are the people that I've taken socially distanced walks with. Those are the people that my kids have been going to Zoom school with. Community gets us through these hard times. And so when I watch that video, I love the wigs and the bubbles and the music and the trampoline. And I also just really remember what we're fighting for. I also want to say that I remember that day when we shot it. It was February, exactly a year ago, really. And I texted the friend who was directing the video. She is an artist, but she also, her main job is feeding folks who are experiencing homelessness with an organization called Free Lunch ATX. And so I lift that up. Her name's Jazz Mills. And when I reached out to Jazz and I said, do I need to clean my house a lot for this video? And she said, don't clean. And it was like, yes, what a gift to not have to change, to just be able to show up as you are. And so I pray that this is a community where people can just show up as they are. And she said, let it be messy. It needs to look like a party. So maybe remember that too when you've got a mess. It kind of looks like a party. I want to share with you a reading as we think about the ways that the world's on fire and the ways that we can still center love and beauty. This reading comes from the Indian author and activist Arundhati Roy, and it has become one of my favorites. She writes, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our databanks and dead ideas, dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. I love that. So we're going to think about, I invite you to think with me and feel with me about the world that we are envisioning, what we want to bring forward from the before times, as I've heard some of my friends call it, and what we could stand to leave behind. I want to think first about the one big thing that I personally really want to leave behind. And that is the negative association with darkness, with language of darkness or blackness. I love that Elandria Williams' reading talks about us being divine beings of light and dark. And oftentimes you hear darkness language, blackness language used in a negative way, the dark night of the soul, or these were dark times. And that our language, I think no one feels this more than you use, that our language matters and has impact. And so if we're gonna argue about certain things, let's really think about the words that we can use to make a positive change. And so I think thinking about darkness and blackness with positive associations as much as possible. And there's so much. The womb where life grows is a dark place. The soil where our gardens and our seeds grow, where a seed bursts forth in what looks like chaos and destruction, but is really life happening. It's dark in there. And for me personally, I've been waking up in the night in this pandemic. I like to joke that my negative thoughts need time for themselves. So I wake up in the night just to focus on them. But I wake up in the night, it's dark, it's hard. I'm alone in my house, but the times that I've spent in that darkness have been some of the most fruitful of this year. It's when I've been writing songs. It's when I've been reading texts that speak to me. And so I give thanks for the darkness of this year and what it has been bringing forth in me. And to put some poetry to that, because poetry is one of the things that's been getting me through this year. And one of the things I do want to carry lightly through the portal. This poem by the Austria-Hungarian poet Rainer Maria Rilke, which has been translated to English, is called Go to the Limits of Your Longing. And a friend sent this to me early in the pandemic because they knew that my job, along with many, many jobs at the YMCA of Austin, where I was a director and a chaplain, had been eliminated due to COVID cutbacks. And I loved my work there. I loved it. And it was a grief to lose that community. First, when the building shut down and we worked from home, and then when there was no money left for our jobs. So a friend sent me this poem, and with that, I want to say that if any of you have been struggling financially through this time, my heart is with you, and you are not alone. They sent me this poem because it has the line, "No feeling is final," which is in our original order of service. No feeling is final. But there are some things about darkness that I also really, really love in this poem. So here it goes. And I invite you, in the spirit of Unitarian Universalism, to connect with the idea of God in whatever way is resonant for you. But I'm going to use Rilke's words because this is Rilke's poem, but I invite you to connect and translate as you need. God speaks to each of us as he makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night. These are the words we dimly hear. You, sent out beyond your recall, go to the limits of your longing. Embody me, flare up like a flame, and make big shadows I can move in. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose me. Nearby is the country they call life. You will know it by its seriousness. Give me your hand. This poem has gained more and more meaning for me over these past few months. Since leaving the YMCA, I have been on a virtual tour with Unitarian Universalist congregations all over the country and Canada. I think y'all are about 45 for me. And every time I read it, it means even more to me. I feel like that line, give me your hand, I think about how much I want to be holding hands again, how much I want to be together in person again. I think about the seriousness of this country and this life in the midst of COVID, in the midst of what we went through with the election and the insurrection at the Capitol. With no feeling is final, if you take one thing from this service, if you struggle with depression or isolation during this pandemic, remember that no feeling is final, that this is not going to be forever. We are not going to have to live this way forever. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Joy cometh in the morning. There will be a morning for this time. And no feeling is final when it comes to joy too. And what that means is, if you are feeling joy, happiness, humor, if something cracks you up, share it. Don't hide your light under a bushel, because you don't know. Like we didn't know when we shot that video. You don't know when the next day you might wake up and someone you love is gone, or a pandemic has struck, or the power has gone out in your whole state. So enjoy your joy while you can and invite people into it. I think so many times, because we know that there's so much struggle in the world, we don't want to shine our light sometimes because we don't want other people to feel bad. Let people feel good with you. Share your joy while you can, just as we remember when we are sad or grieving that no feeling is final there too. All right, and then the part about the shadow. This is the part that's most sacred to me now. Where the voice of God, as Rilke imagines it, says, go to the limits of your longing. Flare up like a flame and make big shadows I can move in. I have felt at the limits of my longing over and over again this year. Just when I thought, as a mother, as a person of faith, as a community member, just when I thought I knew what my limits were, this year has sent me further. And I know that is the way for many of us. And this image of God says, when you flare up like a flame, when the world is on fire, when you're facing the struggle, it creates this shadow, and that's where God is. When you are in the hardest time of your life, you are not alone. The divine is with you, however you define it. This community is with you. Look what you have done. You did not have to keep this church going this way. You could have given up, and you didn't. You are still here after a year of this Zooming stuff. That some days I'm like, God, no more Zoom, please. But you're still here because it matters. And there are people out there who have never been invited to a church like this, who have never been told, as Alandria Williams tells us, that they are worthy just how they are. My other stole is a rainbow stole. And when I go to the Pride Fest here in Austin, people still say, will your church really welcome me? And they get tears in their eyes when I say, yes, please come. So I need you to know you're a young congregation, you're not huge, but you matter. You're so important, and you have the chance right now to reach people. This is accessible to people in ways that it wasn't before, even as hard as it is that we're not together in person. If you can have a minister come from Texas, you can invite anyone you want. And when they get here, make sure that you welcome them, that they don't feel like this is an insular club that they're on the outside of, okay? Invite people. They need to know that you exist, and please, please welcome them in. That's really a lot of the message that I want people to have as I go to different congregations. It's just thank you. Thank you for continuing to come together, and please tell somebody, all right? So that negative association with darkness is something I want to leave behind. I want to imagine the best angels of our nature, the divine, our wisdom, however you want to frame it. I want to remember that that's with us in the hardest times. Now the good stuff. What do you want to take with you? What things have been getting you through? What has helped you get through this year? So I invite you, you're the expert on you. I invite you to check in with yourself about what has been getting you through this time and really amplify it in this next year ahead, this 2021. Things are changing, but we still have a pandemic we're grappling with. We still have to be safe, but we want to invite people to our joy. So for me, it's music. I got to share it with you today, but for you, it could be gardening, it could be walking the dog, it could be reading, it could be virtual reality, it could be all kinds of things. How can you safely share that with your neighbors, with someone far away via Zoom, and just invite people in to your joy? That's my question for you, and I want to leave you with this very short piece of scripture to illustrate that point, and then we'll have a song. So I grew up Unitarian Universalist in a congregation with very little Bible. And so when I went to seminary, because I knew that I wanted to serve in an interfaith context, I knew that I wanted to be able to be there in support of all people of all faiths. I wanted to make sure I got a little bit more literacy with the Bible. And this version is called the Poverty and Justice Bible. It is used, as I understand it, by the Reverend Dr. William Barber, our great racial justice advocate out of North Carolina. And when I heard he used this one, I said, well, let's get that one. And friends, I love to highlight books, but this one comes pre-highlighted with all these passages, I was like, look at that, about poverty and justice, which are very important issues to us as Unitarian Universalists. So if you're interested, this is a great edition of the Bible to have. It has also helped me connect with the more mainline Christians in my family, which has been healing for me. But here is the passage I want to read to you. The Song of Miriam, Exodus chapter 16. Feminist scholar Carol Myers argues it is possibly the most important book of the Bible. As I'm sure you probably know, the Israelites are on the long, hard journey from slavery to the promised land. They are in the desert. It is a long, hard journey, not unlike life in a pandemic. They could not have carried much, as Arundhati Roy says. They could not have carried much. Chapter 16, verse 19 through 21. After the Israelites had walked safely through on dry ground, Miriam, the sister of Erin, was a prophet. So she took her tambourine and led the other women out to play their tambourines and to dance. Then she sang to them. This means so much to me, this story, because she's a prophet, not, oh, and by the way, they tolerated her tambourine, not she was a prophet, and I guess we'll let her have a tambourine. She was a prophet, so she took her tambourine. And the women made time to dance in the midst of all of that struggle. And so I say to you, what is your tambourine in this life? What is your instrument of inclusion? What is your invitation to joy? What is your tambourine? I believe every Unitarian Universalist has an important role to play in getting the message out there that you are loved. So I just invite you to think about what your instrument will be for that. Thank you so much for listening and for the spirit I feel from you, even across the miles. Our closing hymn is My Life Flows On in Endless Song, one of my all-time favorites.